So one of the things that really struck me as interesting about you is you were US born, so you're an American citizen, and you got to work
That
on
is true.
incredible technologies like TikTok. And now you're back in Egypt and moving towards the recruitment space with rocket devs. And
Right.
we chatted about that when we met as well. Just like what was that move all about? So tell the listeners that, because I think that's a really interesting story as well.
Sure. So I think I was speaking to you last time. I was talking about how I was just really motivated to build a company, right? So when I was working at TikTok, I saw this kind of opportunity where I wanted to help creators just kind of monetize in fun ways. So when I was building that, because I didn't have venture capital, I decided, and I was spending my own money, and I was like, I really want to build the best engineering team possible, but with as little, like, I really need to be cost effective here since I was going out of my own pocket. So I started working a lot with developers in Africa, and not just Egypt, in Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And a bias in me that was immediately shattered is how talented these African developers are. And I actually credit that to the democratization of kind of tech education over the past 4 or 5 years, all these Udemy courses, all these YouTube videos. And it's just, there's an incredibly talented tech scene here in Africa that's totally unutilized. And it's kind of like this oil well of opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what inspired me to build Rocket Devs. And I think I was telling you, just having worked in Silicon Valley, like some of these developers that I worked with, in some cases are more talented than, or at least they got more done and were more effective than workers at TikTok or American Express or Google.
Hmm. It's interesting. We also spoke about this idea of bias, right? And blind
Right.
recruitment. You had a different term for it. What did you call it?
Yes, background blind technical vetting is a big part of Rocket Devs. Is that when we get a resume, necessarily in the tech industry, if or actually in just recruitment in general, they kind of have to rely on signals like where have you worked, things like that. But because of our just kind of technical pipeline and our background blind technical vetting, what we really look for is just good fundamentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of it, because a lot of times you get these really let's say talented workers, but they don't really know how to format an American resume. They might do put things, I think, on a good example in Egypt, that they would put their marital status and if they had been in the army, things like that. And if you
Mm.
are kind of like a recruiter abroad, you might look at this like, you know what, I don't like, it's just an immediate turn off. It's just in your bias. You might not even realize that you're
Because
doing
in
it, but
my
you're like, yeah,
culture,
I don't.
that's not important. I'm not interested in that. Why are you telling me that? You must not be right for us.
Exactly. And they would move on. And then, but how about how good he is in React? Isn't that what you're hiring for? Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's why we do background blind. When we get a resume, for us is we've kind of built this pipeline to make it extremely cheap to screen candidates. And that's the whole concept of Rocket Devs, is using the idea of at first we use kind of a slew of automated technical assessments, but
Did you
in
create
recruiting, you can't.
those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Power of programming, right? But in recruiting, it can't all be technical assessments. Like obviously there's a human aspect. I'm not trying to undervalue that.
Yeah, I was
But
going to go there.
once they see that they have these signals, then we come in, we give them the FaceTime, we do kind of like the culture fit as well, right? So
No,
you need both.
yeah, yeah. It totally
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense to filter for technical abilities. And I like your focus on the fundamentals, because I think that might be something that's going to get lost in the coming days as there's more and more no code environments. I was speaking to
Mm-hmm.
somebody yesterday, awesome individual, who's like, well, I'm just going to go full no code and see what I can come up with. And which is really interesting. So to you, the fundamentals are obviously really, really important. Why?
Well, because when you hire a software engineer, you're hiring them for their technical ability. In some cases, like the soft skills are more important than the technical skills, but I think engineering is one of those things where the technical skills are just like, I'm not saying soft skills aren't important, but they are
Sure.
important.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. But technical
yeah,
comes first if you're hiring a technologist. That makes
of
sense. And
course.
then when you
Yeah.
say fundamentals, explain that to me like 12.
Sure. So let's say you're building a website and you just really need that CSS. You need it to look good, right? You don't want it to look like a website out of Windows 98. Or so what you want to do is you're looking for a front end developer, and a lot of like these front end technologies are built on things like React or Angular. So you you are looking for a talented React developer, essentially, right? And in this case, you just need somebody that knows how to build a website in React, right? And
Mhm.
that's not soft skill. talent that is like, that is an actual technical talent. First, we have kind of like a general coding assessment. If they understand the fundamentals of coding, while like, statements, like just kind of very easy, medium questions on leak code difficulty. We don't ask questions that are too hard. We're not trying to trick the candidate. We're just trying to see if they know how to program. And then where Rocket Devs, what we'll do is that we'll also do a multiple choice assessment on React, just to see if they have knowledge in the technology itself that the employer is looking for, right? So because there are a lot of technologies that are kind of separated from the idea of a coding, like, do I know how to code and do I know how to use this technology? They're kind of two separate things. So we test them separately. And then the last thing we do is just kind of a project-based assessment, and that is more specific to the technology again. So we do kind of two assessments that are specific to technology, and then we do just one general assessment.
Okay,
Yep.
interesting. And you chose to actually build this out yourselves rather than using existing testing sites, because there's a lot of them out there. Like I've trialed quite a few, and they left me wanting. But so what made you choose to do that yourselves?
That's a good question. I think we do use CoderByte as kind of like as a base, and we build on top of it a like a testing pipeline. CoderByte doesn't cover everything, but we did choose. So obviously in technology, like we stand on the shoulder of giants, and it makes sense to choose the right technologies to build an excellent pipeline. So we do use some testing services, but the overall enveloping service is just kind of like A to Z versus just kind of a service that lets you administer tests. So we write the tests on top of that, and then we administer kind of like the assessments that are not automated as well on top of that.
And then do your customers get a lot of like a nice detailed breakdown of the results of that, or they just kind of sent the person's CV with some metrics?
Yeah. So man, I wish I could share my screen, but they get excellent. Oh, I can. Okay, I'll make this quick then. Is that here you can see that there is kind of like a little link under general coding assessment. So you can start actually with just click multiple choice assessment in red there. So your question was, are they kind of the candidates, can they see, or the employers, can they see how well the candidate did an interview? And this is how we break it down. So here we'll give them a skill rating. You'll see that in this case, they interviewed in technology called GraphQL. It also has other elements like HTML, CSS, and things like that. So they have a scorecard. We also screen for anti-cheating, which is kind of a big deal, unfortunately, especially in modern testing, which usually happens over the web. So for anti-cheating, we do things that we make sure that they don't click out of the screen too much, that they don't use ChatGPT or copy and paste. And what we do is if they do these things, not necessarily that they cheated, but we'll go ahead and just watch the recording of how they did when they were going through the assessment. And then if you can scroll down a little bit, you could just see a little bit more. So in this case, you could see all the questions that they got wrong. So which could be really important for some employers to see, hey, like, do they have really good concept of JavaScript, all of this stuff. So what we want to do is that we just want to present all the, I guess, all the indicators of what would make a good hire in just one sheet. So we call it a deep profile, and they can go through and just look through how they did on all the assessments instead of needing to screen a candidate and do this 12, 14-hour assessment process with them. And it's essentially gives the employer power to do like through just in an hour. It's almost like they can do 50 candidate assessments instead of needing to do it over the course of weeks with all the data in front of them for them to make their own decisions.
Okay, two questions for you. So one thing that I'm going to stop sharing for now. One thing that I'm really curious about is to do with the plagiarism and simulating the work environment, right? It's always been interesting to me as a non-coder. Like if when you join a company as an engineer, you're going to use Google, you're going to use ChatGPT probably, you're going to use all of these other things. So why is it so bad that somebody actually goes ahead and does that when they're trying to do an assessment?
That's a really good question. I think you could ask the same thing for a math teacher that teaches calculus. Like, why can't they use, or a doctor, why can't they use their TI 89 plus on using, they'll have it probably maybe through life, maybe they won't have it in life. I guess the answer is just to we really want to test for fundamentals, and so do So do employers as well. So you just because you can use a calculator doesn't mean you have good math fundamentals. Just because you can look things, Dr. WebMD doesn't make you a good doctor. You really have to understand systemics, pharmacology, things like that. And I think the same thing for an engineer is that you have to have a good understanding of the basics here. So it is something that we try to make fair. And I would say we only get, just to share some metrics with you, we only get I'd say 15% of potential people that would cheat on an assessment. But what happens with it, when these people get in organizations, the cost of a hire that is not actually performing or does not actually present as well as kind of as well as they did on the test can be very expensive, right? Because you may have given him a sign-in bonus, he's joined the team, you spent all this time onboarding him, and then 5-6 months later, you find out, actually, man, this guy can't code. So that's actually a very expensive mistake. So, and I know it's an expensive mistake because I have made it, right? So kind of personal, and that's why I felt very qualified to build Rocket Devs, because we actually hire out of our own pipeline. I've administered 500 technical interviews at ByteDance, and even before that, American Express. I'm very well aware of kind of also the pitfalls of hiring as well. And we've built Rocket Devs to kind of guard against that.
Amazing. So you've really vetted the individuals that are on this database to reflect the type of engineer that you would hire yourself for your own own company, your startup, whatever. Okay, and then how do you? Why you? Why would they come to you instead of TikTok or SpaceX,
the developers themselves?
The developers that you have on your card there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that kind of goes back to we serve. So there's we serve country, our talent pool, where we source our talent from, are traditionally countries where there's almost zero opportunity, like places like Nigeria, certain places of Egypt, maybe there's a tech scene, but there is kind of this, when I say we're on an oil well and kind of this explosion of talent, that's what I mean by that is a lot of these people are very happy to go through these assessments and prove themselves, and they're looking for this opportunity. And it's really humbling to see that, and it's really humbling to try to kind of help these tech workers. So we mostly screen out of countries kind of countries where opportunities are scarce, like developing countries. And so we don't really have a shortage of people that are willing to apply or willing to go through the technical screening.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. It makes me happy to hear. It's something that I've noticed in my time as a technical recruiter in South Africa. I mean, I get applications from developers in Zimbabwe and Nigeria and Kenya, and they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant, but it's difficult to hire them. So I like the way that things are moving with companies like Remote and Deal, and I think Papaya is another one where they assist companies in that process. It's opening the world up. It's providing opportunities for the talent pools that are out there, like you've identified, which is really, really great, I think. Okay.
So Nix, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? I would love to know what got you into recruiting. I think we had spoken a little bit about that, but I actually don't know the real answer on how you ended up in this profession.
You can interview me. That's cool. It's cool. It's so funny that as a recruiter, like a lifetime recruiter, I rarely get interviewed. I rarely get asked these questions. I've always wondered if someone was going to flip the coin, flip the table. I worked as a spa therapist on cruise ships, but my history is hilarious, actually. I was a special needs teacher. Then I took people swimming with dolphins. Then I worked in publishing. Then I worked in a web development company and all sorts, all over the map. And then I was working in publishing at a massive sports publication, and I realized that I really wasn't that into soccer. So I quit and I went on cruise ships. And the easiest and fastest way for me to do that was to train as a massage therapist. So that's why I did it. It wasn't that I was passionate about anything to do with it.
Bit by the travel bug. You needed to try. I actually know a lot of people like that, believe it or not. Yes. So the story continues.
Yeah, so I've been an expatriate my whole life as well, which is why I've got this weird accent. I've lived in Singapore and Brunei and Mauritius and all over the world. And I think I'd been in South Africa for quite a while then. And I was like, no, you know, I think I was around 27 or something. I was like, this is the time to really have the adventures. So got on cruise ships, discovered while I was on cruise ships, I wasn't a particularly good massage therapist, but I was a really good salesperson. And, you know, the poor American cruise goers would walk out with products like this because I convinced them that this is what they needed to do. And got back to land after I injured myself and couldn't work anymore as a massage therapist. And the agent who'd put me on the ships to start with had seen my sales record, and she said, listen, we're trying to do this recruitment thing, would you be interested? And I'd never heard of anything to do with recruitment. It never even occurred to me it was something for me. But yeah, that was where I was bitten by the recruitment bug, and I never looked back because it was the perfect thing for me. So yeah.
I see. Yeah, I can see that. So was it something that attracted you by recruitment that you could do it abroad and then you fell in love with the profession later, or how did that work out for you, Nitz?
No, the recruitment thing had nothing to do with moving abroad. It was South Africa based again. Like I was land based after that, which was hard. I was so in love with cruise ships and that whole life, and it was really like I had proper withdrawal for like a year after I was stuck back at home. Well, I got to build a business for the first time. I ran my own agency, which was really fun. I had a fantastic partner. She's still a very, very good friend of mine. And and we just went from strength to strength. We did something really interesting as well. Like one of the best stories of my recruitment agency, the recruitment specialist, TRS, is that Sally and I, my business partner and I, identified this incredible talent pool, which were women who wanted to work and contribute and like keep their careers going, but they were moms. And back then, this is what, like 12 years ago or something like that. This is a long time before COVID, a long time before remote working was even a thing. And we started hiring incredible women who wanted to work, contribute, you know, incredibly talented individuals that also wanted to be home with their kids. And so our entire agent base was just women with children who wanted to work. And it was amazing because we'd find these rock stars that were so self-motivated. They didn't need to be managed at all. And they're working for 60% commission, which is also an interesting part of the story, you know. So it's like, yeah, it's yours, go do it, build it, it's yours. And so that was a huge part of why and where I fell in love with recruitment. Another part of it coming back into recruitment after taking a bit of a break was technology. I've always been in love with technology. I just didn't realize it. You know, I've always been fascinated by how this thing does what it does, and who are the people that make the tappy thing happen, and all of that.
How it affects our lives. Absolutely. I have to say, I really resonate with you finding that talent pool that you did with mothers looking for jobs. And I honestly, it's not something I could kind of relate to that very strongly, because it's not something that you think like, hey, I'd want to be a recruiter. But for me, what motivated me to kind of build Rocket Devs was the people, right? The people that just kind of like the talent that are there that are looking for a job. They just need a little bit of help, whether it, you know, through technical screening or just somebody to back them just a little bit, like, you know, clean up their resume and just kind of present them and just give them that little bit of movement, a little bit of guidance in order to present themselves to employers.
No, for sure. So something I wanted to come back to in terms of the soft skills side of things, because obviously, and you've mentioned, it is important, and culture is everything at TerraFlow, where I work now. And it's an interesting term, really, because I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of different companies. In fact, it means a different thing to every different company, right? And for me in my job now, I'm identifying what we call A players, right? And so these individuals who have a really strong balance of technical and soft skills. And I've got 9 values to measure against when I'm recruiting in terms of soft skills, and they're weighted as highly as the technical skills. So I would
love to hear that. Like, maybe you should have a separate conversation online. Could you talk to me a little bit about what these 9 points are?
Yeah, I really should have them memorized by now. My CEO is going to watch this and going to be like, we've been through this a couple of times. So I'm gonna just off the top of my head, my favorite ones. Humility, empathy, grit, hunger. And then there's the obvious ones like problem solving, collaboration, communication skills, productivity, things like that, which need to be measured in order to know that you've got someone really special here. And the other thing that we've got, which is like the ultimate bias. So it's so interesting to talk about bias. It's like at some point, I think you're allowed to be biased. It's like you're deciding who you're bringing into your company. And I'm not talking
Right.
about race or gender or anything like that. I'm
Those
talking
are the
about
bad biases. Yeah.
yeah, right. I'm talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the what do we get to say yes or no to here? Because we're protecting
Hmm.
this culture
What's
that we've
important?
built, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
we call that the Terraflow magic where I am now. And it's
Oh,
like the
okay.
most impossible thing to quantify. But I'm so
Mhm.
interested in it because it's that, when you initially meet someone, that first 10 seconds, there's some
Mhm.
magic in that. There's some
Mhm.
secrets in there that I want to go in and explore further. Like, what is that? And
Mhm.
another part of the reason why that interests me so much is because I don't see AI being able to do that anytime soon.
They can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
they really can't. But I actually, that's an interesting. So how do you feel like some certain Briggs Myers attributes would fall into the magic kind of the magic what you guys look for in TerraFlow, or does it not correspond to Briggs Myers at all? Is that not something you guys look at? I'm kind
It's
of
exactly
curious.
what we're doing at the moment, is trying to either
Okay.
build or use the best possible psychometric test that can give us that sort of
Mhm.
information. So we're trialing a lot of
Yeah.
different stuff, and we'll just do what you did and create a bespoke thing if we need to, and
Yeah.
begin with our internal team members who are clearly rock stars and we've seen them in action and we know them well, and kind of
Mhm.
work out like what are those extraordinary creatures, like how do we find more of
Yes.
them, and what are their
Yeah.
attributes. Yeah.
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 It's certainly a difficult thing to test because I think one of the problems, let's say you're given a multiple choice and you're trying to determine certain attributes, but people will take that test, and when they take Briggs Myers for personal tests, they'll put in actually like how they are. Like, I tend to procrastinate. I like to start things later in the day. But if you're
Mm.
taking a test for an employer, you're not going to put, oh, I'm likely to forget things. I have a problem with procrastination,
Mhm.
organization, things like that. So I think that's essentially I think that's a problem with I've actually often experimented with I'd really like to add like a psychometric aspect to rocket devs, but when I talk to it about it with my team, that's just kind of like something we struggle with, is like, well, we know that the people may not necessarily answer this accurately, right? Because
Mhm.
we know what makes a good worker, and we know how we
Mhm.
are, and there's kind of like this
Mhm.
disconnect, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
how they would answer that.
Yeah,
So
and the
I know it's not
things.
a multiple choice. I know it's not a multiple choice. Like, it'd have to be
Mm.
evaluated differently, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we do the Enneagram, but that's once you come into
Mm,
TerraFlow. Like once you're a permanent team member, we do the Enneagram, which is pretty amazing because that's oh, you learn so much about yourself. So that's kind
mhm,
of, I mean, Myers-Briggs is the foundational,
mhm,
go-to, right? Like
mhm.
very what's the word? Not traditional, established, like trusted,
Mhm.
reputable. But
Yeah.
there's more, there's others, there's other things that are coming out, and we're testing several of them right now because they're just that much younger and more evolved and looking into different nooks and crannies in different areas. But to answer
Yeah.
you on that Terraflow magic and what that first
Yeah.
10 seconds comes down to, for me, it's about warmth and openness.
Mm,
And you might have somebody, and I've had many, many conversations, not arguments, but debates about this, like how important is that actually? Do you not need to have that person who might be massively introverted and not very good with people, but a complete
mhm,
guru on whatever it is that you need done technically? And I
mhm.
guess it's just the challenge that I've been tasked with. And part of the reason why I joined TerraFlow was, is it possible to find, enough people who have both?
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Those guys are your A players, like you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So to go back to weird and wonderful things that we did before we did what we're doing now, what struck me that I have to ask you about in your CV was your first job that you had
Ah,
listed there. Like
yeah.
end of life, what? That was
Oh,
extraordinary.
yeah. 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 I think so. So this is just kind of part of college. I worked on an auxiliary crew. So I went to undergrad in Auburn, Alabama. And in Alabama, hospitals are a big thing. I think maybe because everybody there is so unhealthy.
Yeah.
But that's like, there's so much money in medical care down there. It's like one of the biggest industries. But yeah, had this idea of I guess
So lots of
I
people
wasn't really
dying. Oh my
sure.
God. Like I'm
Yeah,
just hearing what
that's
you
kind
just
of
said to me, huge
well,
pharmaceutical
it's true.
presence,
It's
lots of
true, by the
incredibly
way. There
sick
is a
people as a
huge,
result. Oh wow.
yeah, I think it's I mean, this is true, but I think it's obviously there's some attributes there to unhealthy lifestyles and things like that, and that happened particularly in the Deep South. And if you are watching this and you happen to be from the Deep South, I am not saying that you're fat and that you have an unhealthy lifestyle. I'm just saying that there is high correlation of high unhealthy lifestyles in kind of the southern states, and that medical industry is booming down there. But when I was there, it seemed to like so just kind of going to high school in Georgia and just being in the South, it seemed like that's where the money was. So I was kind of interested in just being a doctor potentially. So that's how I kind of ended up just spending some time in a hospital. I learned that it wasn't really for me, but I think like, you know, experiences like that in high school and college kind of shape. You need to be in a hospital to realize if you want to be in a doctor. Don't you agree? Spend some time there and you kind of realize very quickly of like, you know, that you have, you know, what it takes to,
or not,
even if you'd like to be. I have to say, this is definitely going off topic of recruiting, but it did seem to me that everybody there was not happy, and that is something that like that I didn't feel like I could emotionally handle being in an ER room for too long.
And funnily enough, my first job was quite similar in that I was a special needs teacher. You know, straight out of college, you're so emotionally immature, whether you like it or not. And the kids were amazing. I mean, they just lit me up endlessly, but it was painful dealing with the parents, you know, like they had a lot of them were grieving. It was a lot to ask of someone so young. You know, you'd probably find that you could handle the hospital environment a lot better now that you've got some years under your belt. But I think at that time was really difficult, and I totally can relate to that. Something that you mentioned there that I think is interesting for recruitment, going into these different jobs and seeing a profile like yours as a recruiter with 15 years experience or something now. I like that variation. I like to see people who've done weird and wacky things. You know, it's certainly not and for you as well, I'm sure, like you've been reviewing a lot of candidates for a while now. It's that interesting patchwork sort of quilt that becomes an interesting story and kind of lends itself towards somebody who might have some good soft skills because they've been adventurous in life and they've tried different things, failed, you know, hurt, all of that stuff. And how important it is as an individual to get to know fast, as an NO, like get to the rejection quickly, like, go jump, take the deep dive into something that sounds like it could be interesting, but get to it's not for me as quickly as possible. And it's the same process in filtering candidates and with people who are applying for jobs. Like get to know as quick, get to rejection as quick as possible. If this is not a match, let's just find that out as early as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. I've got a question for you, Nix. How long were you did you work for an agency before you decided to start your own agency, and kind of like what was your mindset when you're like, you know what, I can do this better? And
no, I've
you went
never
off on your
worked.
own.
I've never worked in an agency environment other than my own
I see.
one. So
I
I
see.
have no idea what that must be like. I think it must be very challenging. And I always give agents the time and the space because I can only imagine how difficult it is, especially when it's an agency approaching an internal recruiter. You know, it's like, yeah, I can do your job better. Well, no, you can't because you're not internal, you know, whatever this strange dialogue, the messaging seems to be. So I always have the conversation, and I must say there's some really interesting sort of innovations happening with agencies at the moment, like yourself. You know, there's add-ons, and so a huge gap for me as a technical recruiter is that I can't read code. I can't so it becomes a bottleneck for the hiring managers and so on, who are incredibly busy. So to sit and then take the time to look through lines of code to assess somebody, that is a huge gap that you seem to have been filling. You know, it's like, we'll take that off your plate. We'll show you that this person is an X, Y, and Z at X, Y, and Z level. So that's very cool, because I'm always looking for somebody who is a recruiter as well as a coder, and I haven't quite found that person yet who can do both, you know?
Yeah. I think what you're talking about here is perhaps like kind of joining a testing service with recruiting, right? So if you can come to this incredibly busy hiring manager and say, hey, this is a great candidate. He kind of matches the, like from a people perspective, but also from a technical perspective, his skills are there, and these are the scores. If you could do that, I think that would lend itself to a very successful business model. And actually, I do have a story to tell here. So Rocket Devs, it's not that old. We just launched kind of in the middle of summer. And we're just trying to still find our identity very much. So when we reach out, we're reaching out to LinkedIn, and we're kind of doing the how can we solve your problems, right, approach. right? So a lot of them are willing to kind of kind of bring on these like rocket developers and work with them, but a lot of these companies also kind of have this bigger problem, which you mentioned, which is that I would really that we have these incredibly busy managers and they're not actually trained to interview, right? And we just need these
Totally.
candidates. So believe it or not, on most of the enterprise calls that I've been on, which is not that many, like 7 or 8, but I would say half of them have actually recruited me to build essentially just kind of run their technical pipeline from A to Z, more as a consultancy, which is really interesting. And as a new
Mm.
business owner, I kind of have to follow the money, which is really ties into what you said, is that they want me to not just kind of to post the ads, to actually just run their through with our pipeline, just run their interview from start to finish, and at the end kind of present this finished product, which we shared on screen before. These are the candidates, these are their scores, and then they can make the assessment based on off of culture fit. And when they have these interviews, they have kind of these signals on what they're looking for. So I was really surprised to see that we actually have 2 or 3 companies in South Africa that we're working out deals for kind
Oh,
of this hiring
interesting.
pipeline, but that's not where when I started Rocket Devs, it's not where I thought it would go.
It's what
But it
never is
seems like
though,
we're
is
going
it?
that
Never
direction.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it
Yeah.
never
So
is.
it
And
just
I think
interesting.
don't think that's a bad thing. You can't
Mhm.
always foresee exactly what the market needs until you jump in and you do it. Okay, and
Mhm.
then you say they're South African companies. So are you assisting them with the whole visa tax side of things, or are you using external agencies to do that?
So we're doing full-time hires for them. We're just presenting the signals for them to make
Okay.
the final choice.
Hmm. And then they take over on
And
the hiring process from
this
yes
is
onwards.
this is especially because we've actually recently seen the squeeze, and I'm sure you know a lot about it, starting from 2022, was it? So I mean, and I think a lot of companies are doing this belt tightening, right? So
Hmm.
if you're a tech recruiter out there, you know all about it. On Reddit r/slash recruitment. I know,
Hmm.
and I hear recruiters talk about it every day. And I would say actually, coming from a service, it's actually kind of affecting me. Maybe it's not a great time to start a business like this, but uh, with this belt tightening, essentially like, but there's still like problems to solve, even though they are tightening their belt and they're closing their door early. Like I'm sure
You just
every
got to
company that I reach
identify
out
those
to.
the way to
Mhm.
solve the problems. Like it
Right,
sounds like you have, right? Like so
right,
technical recruiters like myself can't review code. You
right.
can. So
uh,
build that out, which you have, and just solving a
yeah,
problem there. That's pretty cool.
yeah. But I have to say, like, the amount of companies that I wasn't in the industry 2 years ago, but I have to imagine it was different. They're saying like, hey, you know, we're not doing any external help. Like we're doing this
Mm.
belt tightening. And when I talk to these companies on these enterprise calls, I'm talking to CEOs or like, you know, especially head of talent recruitment. They're like, they always start the call, we're belt tightening, you know, and we're not trying to,
You're not going to
we're
get any
trying to
money
bring
out of us,
everything
but
internal, right? Yeah. So
yeah.
it's a tough market, but you know, I think it's definitely certainly a tough market right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been interesting for me just in the year that I've been at Terraflow, because where we were when I started and 12 months later, what my job actually is quite different to what I expected as well. And I spent a lot
Mhm.
of time, not so much recently, but with, from like Chat GPT dropping onwards, really researching these tools instead of researching people. Instead of looking
Mhm.
for people, I've been looking for who's got what, so that they could
Mhm.
basically act as if there were 5, 10, 15 people, because they're using these tools for automation or whatever it is. And then also for
Mhm.
myself as a recruiter, rather than me needing another like a junior or an assistant or something like that, what are the tools that I can bring in that are really cost effective, that can help me do my
Mhm.
job better, as if I am
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And
Right.
that's been a really interesting journey as well. And for me, having the conversation that we've had now, it sounds like you're kind of sitting in the middle of that. You've got the human
Right.
element. You're Ali. You can give Ali a call. You can say this is what we need, but then you've also
Right.
automated a whole bunch of stuff, which means that it's
Right.
probably quite time efficient as well.
Yes. Yeah. I think what we have recently done for our pricing for a lot of these South African companies is that we're saying that for a price of a recruiter, we could, so usually like a recruiter would have an upfront cost, like maybe 20% of CTC, the cost of the company. We're going to take that on for the first year's salary. So we can say maybe for 25% CTC, I'm saying these terms because these are deals we struck recently, just for an extra 5%, we'll also take care of the testing. So your busy hiring managers that, by the way, actually probably could not do, they don't have a lot of experience administering assessments, we will take care of that for you, and we'll just present the data points to
I can hear
we'll just present
hiring
the data
managers
points.
across the world collectively, go the sigh of relief. Don't have to do
Yeah,
don't have to do that
yeah.
again. It's very rare
You
that they
know,
enjoy the recruitment process, I think.
yeah, I have to say, so like I have to, as an engineer at TikTok, what TikTok and these big companies would do is that first of all, they take you and you have to do like a 12-hour like course, like, you know, how to be unbiased. Like they really want to make sure that you know how to give a good technical interview because they don't want to miss out on a good hire. And I could talk to you a little bit about how they do internal recruiting in these big companies, but essentially like if you're past a certain let's say if you're a senior or like kind of past the senior level, then you have to give a certain amount of interviews a week, right? And it's kind of like randomly assigned. And they will take these interviews, right? So let's say each person that, it's never one person that interviews somebody more than once. You specialize in a very specific type of interview, like let's say system design, right? So I specialize in a system design interview. I'd write my write-up, right? And then there'd be a panel at the end and they take this write-up, let's say 4 or 5, that's kind of like the Google style, and they review every week or two. They'll have a stack of, they'll have a stack of all the assessment results, and they'll be like, okay, does this person, is he a strong hire? Is he a weak hire, or just a hire? And they really need like so many strong hire signals. If they get one weak hire signal from any of the interviews, they'll discard the candidate just due to the price of just hiring a negative candidate. So so the way they see it is that they'd rather pass on a good candidate than hire a bad candidate. In fact, they'd rather pass on 5 good candidates than hire 1 bad candidate, right? So they're really looking for, because the price of a bad hire is actually very expensive. So they're really looking for very strong signals there. And that's how they do. That's how they do it in these big tech Silicon Valley companies.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you've picked up on recently that's happening in the world that you think is interesting that would be
that's a good question.
value chatting about?
Yeah, we talked on ChatGPT, which is such a hot topic on especially on podcasts that I listen. And I listen to a lot of recruiting podcasts. Ironically, when I was trying to get in, I was trying to understand the business. And I think that people do overestimate the value of ChatGPT when it comes to just kind of like doing everyday work. There is a lot of tools out there. I feel like recruiters are going to have to kind of come to terms with the fact that there is a lot of automation that's taking place, and then there's kind of like the human element, but they're 2 separate things. Like automation is important where it needs to be, and the human element is important where it needs to be. So it's really, I think what's interesting is kind of like the reach out automation that's kind of happening. Like the companies that are being really successful now, they have like these really great what are they called, CRMs, right? Where they're emailing, they kind of have these lists that they scraped off the internet, and they're kind of doing these mass email lists, and then from there they can follow up. So instead of you writing 1 to 10 emails a day, like you have actually an automated system that sends out 100 emails with that perfect lavender formatted, like, email that you get a response, and then that's when the recruiters jump on. So I think it is very hard time to be a recruiter right now, because there is a lot of automation coming in, but it can't take care of everything. So knowing where to automate and knowing where to apply that personal touch, very challenging.
That's the key.
Opinion.
It's the key. Absolutely. And I actually like it. That's something that really excites me, is that I think with all of this automation and with AI taking things to the next level in terms of picking up on hopefully just the mundane and repetitive things that can be automated, that can be, provide us with slightly different insights or whatever it is, like with what MetaView does, is that it highlights the human element. It makes you question, okay, so what is that magic thing that the human can do? Like, because we can feel instantly, you can see when a post or an email has been written by ChatGPT and the person hasn't bothered to personalize it at all. And I'm even getting to the point that I'm seeing so much of it that I'm starting to see where they use ChatGPT and where it's the person talking, right? And then you know what it feels like to use a chatbot. It's the most frustrating thing if you can't get what you need immediately. You want a person. You want a person who can listen to your story and give you the solution, and I think that that's a really cool thing. I think that the human element is being highlighted through AI and automation taking over all the other stuff.
But I think where you usually use a personal assistant, that's when it's just really important to have some sort of coder, especially web scraping in your group. If I were to give one advice to any recruiter, just as a tech person that's approached this and kind of the lens of what can you do with tech, is that all your reach out automations, your initial first message, should be done automatically. You should be using some sort of CRM, and you should be scraping off of lists. So something that's made Rocket Dev successful. Let's say I have a tool for founders, right? I went to ycombinator.com. I used Python and Selenium, and I got everybody's email, right? In an Excel sheet, right? And then you upload it to a CRM, right? And when you scrape, I'm company secrets here, but when you scrape, but this is for recruiters. So if you're listening, this is great. But when you scrape, essentially, let's say you're going to you have to scrape. So when you scrape, you have all these cells. Imagine kind of like this Excel sheet, right? So you have maybe the person's first name, you want the person's last name, you want the position, you want the job description, maybe the size of the company. And if they have, let's say you have a column of like what the company does, right? So you want to scrape that as well. So now you have 7 rows. So what you can do with these rows with AI, you generally have kind of like your boilerplate kind of offering, right? But on the top, you can customize this first row with AI. You essentially, what you do is like, this is your offering, like write me a very personalized statement
for this particular
based
candidate.
off of that's what AI is really great at, just 2 or 3 lines, but it makes the email appear personalized, right? So you've combined automation with just a sprinkle of AI. You haven't really overused it here. It can't write your whole email. It doesn't understand your whole product, but it can. And that way you can format 500 emails sent out and they appear personalized. And that's the perfect touch of AI. So that's how, that's a tip for you guys. And that's, it's yielded me some pretty good results.
Okay, nice one. Thank you. That's generous of you.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool. So I think we come to an end. I just have to ask before we close off, what does your t-shirt say?
Oh yeah, I got this from a hackathon, I think at American Express. I think it's people plus coffee plus computers plus pizza.
Always.
Plus pizza equals growth.
So cute. Okay, nice.
Yeah, so this is from my very first hackathon. Yeah.
How did you do?
My wife is doing laundry today. I love hackathons. I kind of have that personality where kind of a big dreamer. So I just, I can pull a product with some code together. I tend to have that skill. So I did pretty well. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay, bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye.